Well, a good Friday morning to all of you. I'm Paul Bradford, and on behalf of the Office of Career Development and Calling and Student Life, it's our joy to bring you today's speaker. Months ago, I opened up an email about this Dave Evans guy, and as someone who had spent about 10 years in technology marketing, I wanted to find out more, so I clicked and watched a presentation he had given in his capacity at Stanford's Life Design Lab, and it was immediate and apparent that he had a message that all students needed to hear, and a message that our office deeply resonates with. Yes, at Career Development and Calling, we can help you write a better resume. We can help you with interview skills and a bunch of other tools to help you launch really well. But beyond all that, our real mission is to help you understand what God made you good at, what you're drawn to, and how to live those out with an authentic confidence and a grateful humility. We're here to help you find your story, shape your story, tell your story, and live your story. And when you do the work, you'll know what we know to be true. That taking that first step, be it toward choosing a major or finding an internship or landing a job, those first steps are not as scary as you may think. So come see us, preferably before May of your senior year. Be good. That's supposed to get more of a laugh. That's okay. It's Friday. So in 2007, Dave Evans started his third career teaching Stanford's wildly popular course, and this is the entire title, How to Apply the Innovation Principles of Design Thinking to the Wicked Problem of Designing Your Life. Isn't that awesome? I want to teach that class. His first career was a failed attempt to solve the energy crisis in the late 70s, and Dave's second sojourn was 30-plus years in Silicon Valley, including leading an early mouse and printer companies for a small company called Apple. You might have heard of them. And co-founding Electronic Arts. In 1990, Dave shifted to the role of a management consultant for technology firms, large and small. He holds a BS and an MSME from Stanford and a graduate diploma in contemplative Christian spirituality from San Francisco Theological Seminary. And he serves as the entrepreneur in residence at the Redeemer Church in New York City. He's also the co-author of the best-selling book, Designing Your Life, that has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Fast Company. One final thing before I bring Dave up, we're hosting a Q&A session tonight, 6:30, Kerr Student Center, coffee, desserts, and Dave. And we've got about 20 more spots left. And my hunch is after you hear Dave today, you're all going to want to come. So afterward, if you want to come to this event, come see me up front and I'll give you one of these cards. So let's bring Dave Evans up with a warm welcome to Westmont.
Thanks, Brett. Good morning. Don't you love going to Westmont? I mean, seriously, how cool is it to be a college student here? I mean, it's like really pretty and they love Jesus. How cool is that as a combination? I mean, you know, I love college. I love going to college. I love teaching college. I've been teaching college on the side for, 18 years, on the front for about 10. I'm really glad to be with you because the way things have gone, I'm starting my 11th year at Stanford, and I, by decree, am no longer allowed to teach students. They don't let me. I only teach teachers now. I'm teaching teachers to get the word out, So I spent all day yesterday at UCSB and all day here today at Westmont. So I actually have to leave Stanford to get to talk to a student. They won't let me do it anymore. So I'm really thrilled to do that. And yesterday was really kind of a heartbreaking day for me because it was the beginning of the classes we teach. By the way, am I talking too fast for you? Good, because I'm not going to slow down. So the beginning of classes for my team was yesterday when we teach Designing Your Stanford, which is the freshmen and sophomores, to teach them how to use design thinking to design their college experience, to figure out what college is really all about. It's a really, really lovely time to talk to a room full of really, pricky, ready to go young rising sophomores and freshmen talking about what college is for. And here, of course, we can have the rest of the conversation at Westmont because we can include, the full story of the nature of reality, God's story for what's going to go on before us and in your own lives. Now, how many of you, this is like an important time for you? This college thing is like a big deal, right? I mean, it's expensive enough. How many of you are hoping by the time you graduate that perhaps you would have heard the call of God? That what you want by the time you get out of here, let's see if we can get this to work. Come on, guys. Talk to me. It worked before. There we go. So, who's hoping they hear the call before they graduate? How many of you would like to get a call before you graduate? 60%. The rest of you don't raise your hands, or you already got it? I mean, okay. So this thing about call is a big deal, right? I mean, don't you want to know? I mean, I spent most of my college career kind of going, just tell me. I'm willing to do it. Just tell me. Why is this so hard? So how does that actually work? So let's take a look at that today. We're going to take a look at the whole idea of where does calling come from? How does this thing work? This thing doesn't work at all. That's how it works. So let's look at we're going to do a little bit of Bible study here. This is the wedding at Cana. You can barely see that, but let me read it for you. This is bigger back there. So you know the story. On the third day, there was a marriage at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the marriage with his disciples, and when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus says, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "O woman, what have you to do with me? My hour has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now 6 stone jars were standing there for the Jewish rite of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said, "Now draw some out and take it to the steward of the feast." And you know how the rest of the story goes. He takes the wine, it's killer wine. Usually, they serve the really good stuff first before people get half drunk and can't tell anymore. And you've saved the best wine until the end of the day. That's amazing. In fact, it is so amazing. This was the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is the beginning of the really cool stuff. Thanks, dude. We'll see if this works. Okay. So, the clicker works. Thank you. Yes, sir. There we go. That's right. Salvation is good, but a working clicker, that's what I really need. Okay. So let's take a look at the story a little bit. Let's kind of drill into the story a little bit. So it starts with, so Mary turns to Jesus at the wedding, and she says, "They have no wine." It's just an objective fact. Now, I'm going to get a little speculative here. From an exegetical point of view, there might be some historians and some actual theologians in the room that could get a little nervous, but I'm just a retread marketing guy, so I can get away with it. So the deal is, mom turns to the son and says, "They have no wine, honey. Have you noticed?" Now, apparently, Jesus picks up the implication here that mom is suggesting perhaps he should do that wine thing. Because, his response is, "Woman, what have you to do with me?" Now, again, this is not like, "Hey, woman," you might think that's the way it sounded to us. No, "Oh, woman," this is a manner of respect, regard. "Mom, dear mother, what are you talking about? The time hasn't yet come. Today's not the day." Right? So they've run out of wine. "Mom, not today." Well, do whatever he says. You're Jesus. Now, how are you feeling at this? Do whatever he says. You're going, "Ah." So then what? Let's go make some wine. Wait a minute. Does this work for you? I mean, we know this story. This is a great story. Except, what's up with that? They've run out of wine. Not today. Do what he says. Okay, let's make some wine. So my favorite question is, who sinned, Jesus or Mary? It's got to be one of them. Right? I mean, Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is perfect. Jesus is in complete union with his Father at all times. He wakes up in the morning, he's getting dressed to go to the wedding, he knows who he is, he knows what his mission is, he goes to the wedding, his mom, who we think highly of, but she's not divine, says, "Hey, son, what do you think here?" And he goes, "No, my time has not yet come. The Messiah's discernment is not now." And then he gets goaded into doing it. So either Mary's wrong, and Jesus is violating what the Father has already told him, or Jesus was wrong and today is the day. I don't like my choices. This is not working for me. Oh, and by the way, on the side, in order to make 150 gallons of wine to serve to drunk people, that's enough wine to inebriate the entire Palestinian region. I mean, we're starting the visible ministry of the incarnation with party. Really? What is up with that? I haven't got time to go into that digression. By the way, one of my favorite questions in exegetical study is, so, dude, totally, what is up with that? You know, one of the problems with hanging out with a lot of nice Christian people, you guys hang out with nice Christian people all the time, is you act like this all makes sense. You know, like, oh, I just love the Lord. It's just so great, you know. And then he made the wine, and it was lovely, and I love that story. And I'm going like, what's up with that? So, I mean, how do we figure out what's up with that? Well, maybe some scripture can help us out. Maybe some scripture can give us some ideas about how to think about this. Another one of my favorite verses at the very end of Luke 2. That's where the story where, you know, he wows the Sabbath teachers and so on. You know, the pre-adolescent Jesus is doing his thing. And it ends with, and Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Another one of those nice Christian, and Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. That's great, except like, whoa, what's up with that? That is so offensive. Do you catch that? There's something really wrong in that sentence. Do you notice it? And Jesus grew, okay. In wisdom and in stature, okay. And in favor with God and man, in favor with, whoa. In favor with God. Wait, didn't they told me when I was your age, they told me over and over, apparently they thought I was going to forget, that, you know, God loved me. God so loved me because we know because he gave his son, you know, and God really loved, in fact, God unconditionally loves me, unconditionally loves you. God will never love you more than he does today, and he's never loved you less. Right? You heard that? You heard that? Good news, right? Except it doesn't apply. God liked Jesus better over time. Jesus got better, which meant he was worse. But Jesus is perfect. Jesus is sinless. Jesus is the Messiah. How does perfect get better? Is this working for you? This is not working for me. This is offensive. This does not line up with the Jesus they told me about. And so how do we make sense out of this thing? Well, you know, what do we mean by perfect? When you think about perfect, what comes to mind? I mean, things like, you know, there's the perfect cut of a diamond, an absolutely perfect natural diamond in what's called the perfect cut. That's the modern cut. That's incredibly brilliant and shows forth all the light. That's a perfect diamond. You know, it's like a perfect sunrise or sunset. That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. You know, or in fact, the classic answer to perfection is the perfect circle, which, because you've got a lousy projector, is now an ellipse. So this is great, you know. It was a circle this morning. It really was. But I can work it in. I'll make this work. Okay, here's the way. So the HUD is, you know, so conceptually, I mean, a circle is a perfect thing. But again, you know, we've never actually even seen a perfect circle. I mean, the idea of an absolutely infinitesimally small, non-existent, but imaginable locus of equidistance around an infinitesimally small, non-existent place. You know, that's like we've never even seen a perfect circle. We can just imagine one, and that's perfect. Like, that's what perfect looks like. How does that get better? But here's the problem. Whose idea is this way that I'm talking now? It's Plato's idea. That whole circle thing, the meditation on a circle, that's all Plato. That's all Greek thinking. That's rooted in a cosmological orientation to reality called Greek dualism, where spirituality and materiality are fundamentally different from one another. They're entirely alternate. One has nothing to do with the other. And they, by the way, are organized hierarchically, one over the other. Which one's better, by the way? Spirit or material? Spirit. Why? Because it's more real. Why is it more real? Because it's eternal, it's ethereal, it's untouchable. Why is the coolest job in town being a philosopher? Coolest job in town. Why? Because what do philosophers do? They think. They come up with ideas. They create things that's the closest thing to a godlike behavior. I mean, something as mundane and tacky as like, a computer mouse. Material stuff, it's all an illusion. All this material stuff's an illusion. Theoretical perfection, that's what's real. That's Greek dualism. And by the way, it's completely unbiblical thinking. And it massively invades the culture in which you have been raised. You're all children of Plato and Aristotle, whether you like it or not, because you're going to college. You're in the academy. Why do we call it the academy? Because that was the name of Plato's school in Greece. If you're an academician, you are the child of Plato. And inadvertently, you have all picked up a ton of dualism without even knowing it. And that's not the way the world is organized according to God. Let's take another look at another metaphor. What if we start talking about roses? What's more perfect? The rose seed, the rose shoot, the rose bud, or the rose blossom? Which one's more perfect? Now, they're all perfect, but one's like a little more perfect, isn't it? Doesn't the blossom seem a little more perfect? It does seem that way. Almost everybody says it. Yeah, that's like, I'm going with the thing on the upper right. That's the cool thing. Which forces us to ask another question. What's wrong with the other stuff? What's wrong with the shoot? What's the shoot doing wrong? You're a farmer, you're a gardener, you stand over there. Hey, dude, get your act together. Let's go, blossom. Come on. What's wrong with the shoot? Nothing. But it's not as cool as the blossom, is it? Why? Why? What's not wrong, but what's less right? The rose blossom, it's kind of rosier, isn't it? It's a little more rosish. Now, there might be some biologists in the room who go, no, the seed, if you could really understand, the seed is the cool one. It's amazing in there, But for most of us, it's like it smells good, particularly if it's like a Mr. Lincoln or something. That's really the rosy thing. Why? Because it is a greater representation and revelation of its inherent nature. It is displaying the glory of God more fully. It is more fully realized, i.e. become real. I mean, that whole blossom, all that stuff's going on in all of these things all the time and everywhere. But when it fully becomes revealed, that's what God had in mind. Because reality is a dynamic thing. It's a verb, not a noun. It's a conversation, not a state. And everything's on an arc moving toward what? Toward full glorification and unity with God. For God has made known to us the mystery of his will, ... Paul says, the union of all things in heaven and earth in him, moving toward their characterization of the full glory. That's what that rose is doing. So perfection is much more about the being perfected. The verb of perfect is a much more Christian concept than the adjective of perfect. So yes, Jesus is perfect. But he's growing in wisdom and in stature. He's getting blossomy on the way to the fullness of who it is he's been born to become. So that allows us to go back and take another look at this story. So now I'm going to go really speculative here, make some real theologians terribly nervous, but it's just one chapel, we'll get through it. So what if it's like this? What if my conundrum with who sinned, Mary or Jesus, is resolved in the following way? So Jesus wakes up that morning, and he has his morning quiet time, and he allows him to Bible Gateway and downloads a couple of verses, and he's doing fine, and he really does think today's not the day. I mean, he's really moving into his fullness of discernment and understanding what the nature of reality before him is, and he's happily going to this wedding with his family and with his friends. And then his mother Mary. Now, an unfortunate thing, one of the boomerang backlashes of defending the fact that we, as most of us are Protestants, don't think Mary's divine, that we, and the Catholics do, we keep shoving her head underwater. But, God didn't ask me to bear the Son of God. And how many 14-year-old girls do you know have been tapped for that task? She's pretty special. Okay, so I think we could agree that Mary's reasonably special and somehow profoundly linked with the reality of God. There's a lot she can teach us. So let's sort of, in the process of de-divinizing Mary, sometimes we've downgraded her. Pretty cool woman. seems to have a pretty dynamic reality of a dynamic relationship with the Spirit and with God. And so she's at the wedding as well, and she's noticing what's going on. It's really interesting when you look at the way she's talking to people, because I think it's incredibly gentle and responsive, as opposed to sort of Jewish mother manipulative, like, honey, they're out of wine. I don't think it's that. I think it's, dear, they're out of wine. What's going on there? What if, hypothetically, Mary is sensing from the Spirit that something's supposed to happen today? Now, she is a humble woman. She doesn't necessarily know she's got this thing locked and loaded. So what she's going to do is she's going to give disclosure to that which she has discerned, and then recognize Jesus' own autonomy and put the invitation out there. They're out of wine, hon. Just thought you wanted to know. And Jesus goes, Mom, I don't think so. It's not today. You notice Mary doesn't go, I heard the Spirit. Get the beans out of your ears. Let's try this again. Honey, they're out of wine. Your line is, oh, I'll go do a miracle. Okay, no. We don't have that scene. We just, and think about this. Now, you're Jesus. You've just said, woman, my time has not yet come. And she goes, that's, what's her internal conversation? That's interesting. I wonder if I heard the Spirit wrong. Guess what? I don't know. Because, by the way, we have faith in God, not knowledge. Certainty is not what God grants you. He grants you faith, not certainty. You never actually know that you're doing the right thing. I mean, do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt you're doing the right thing? No, because I'm a faithful person. I have faith, not knowledge. She doesn't know, but what does she do with what she understands? Well, what she does is she goes, do whatever he says. Kind of leaves the door open for Jesus, but he can shut it if he wants. And then off we go to 150 gallons. What if what happens at that moment in time for Jesus is he's going, no, Mom, it's not now. And she just turns and says whatever he says. And then Jesus goes, oh my goodness. It is today. In fact, it's right now. Huh? Who knew? Oh, okay, guys, come with me. We have some work to do. Now, I don't know that that's accurate, but frankly, my sense of it exegetically is that interpretation is a lot kinder to Scripture and a lot kinder to the understanding of the Messiah that God's been giving me over the past 45 years. Which tells us a lot about the nature of calling, does it not? So what does that tell us? What that tells us is Jesus lived this way all the time. John 5. Truly I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever he does, that the Son does likewise. Or my mentor, 84 years old, would say to me, Jesus, the least creative man who ever lived. Follow, 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 follow. That's all he does. Gets up. What am I doing today? I'm following the Father. Got any ideas? Not really. No. Just following. That's my deal. I'm not sure that's an entirely fair way to put it, but, if Jesus himself can only do that which he sees the Father doing, and Jesus is the second Adam, the fully human person that invites us to know what it means to live in relationship to God, then that call and response, right? You like call and response singing? Call and response is the fundamental nature of the walk of faith. And the Father is supposed to be generous with inviting us forward at all times. This way of living is what being the Christ is about. Colossians, the great Christological passage, talks about in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. That's a paradoxical statement. We could meditate on this forever. There are probably classes where they make you write essays about that here. That's a good idea, by the way. But the fullness of God is pleased to dwell in Jesus, who also, of course, practiced the kenosis of and not holding equality with God a thing to be grasped. That's a whole other teaching we haven't got time for this morning. But so Jesus walks through the finitude of his mortal life and even the constrained finitude of only living out a portion of his full self in the life before him, and that way, and doing it by watching the Father all the time, dynamically. And that way of being in the world is characterized as the fullness of God being pleased to dwell therein. That's what fullness looks like. this slowly, dynamically unfolding thing. I'm not saying God never gives guidance. I'm not saying God never gives us a bit of a runway in front of us. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is this is much more dynamic than we sometimes think we want to hold it. So back to this question of, can I get my call while I'm here? Do I want to get this call? What am I asking for? Let's say if one of the gifts you want to receive before you graduate is a sense of calling, how can we define that in a way that's scripturally appropriate? Well, again, the Psalms can help us here. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Psalm 37:4. Great phrase, shows up on the bottom of emails all the time. It's one of those cool one-liners. And there's two ways to hear it. One way is, delight yourself in the Lord, and you get the desires of your heart. Be a good Christian, do the right thing, be a person who thinks that God's stuff is delightful, and you get a cookie. It's what I call the vending machine God. You get what you want. This is a big verse for the prosperity gospel guys. Don't get me started. Which I think is nonsense. Is this verse saying the promise of Lord's delight is the object of my desire, or is in fact the gift the desire itself? That if you delight yourself in the Lord, if you fall in love with God, if you keep leaning into that invitation the way Jesus did, what you get is heart transformation. What you get is longing. What you get is desire. The gift of God is the desire for what God desires. Your heart starts becoming God's heart. You don't turn into another person, you start turning into the fullness of you, as the glory of God in your heart begins to become real. So delight yourself in the Lord, and frankly, what you get is heartache. Because so much of what we long for in the Lord we'll never see. But that's okay, because it keeps us moving in the right direction. It's the vector that pulls us heavenward. So maybe what calling is about is a little different. Maybe there's the whole idea of, do I want to get the call, or do I want to become an effectively called person? Another one of those, what's up with that? By the way, it is my favorite question. So I'm a marketing guy. I'm a high-tech marketing guy. I've delivered lots of products. I rolled out the first mouse to the world. We rolled out interactive software, rolled out laser printing. I'm pretty good at the product introduction thing. And I kind of keep wishing that God had hired me to do the rollout for the incarnation. I just finished the first year of the book, been on the road, done about 100 speaking gigs. I'm pretty good at the product rollout. Now, depending on which historian you look at and how long the ministry was and exactly when Jesus died, it looks like roughly, with the exception of two interesting moments in time, the birth narrative and that Sabbath school day when he wowed everybody. We got those two scenes, and then he doesn't show up again until something on the order of 30-something, and then for 1 to 3 years. So depending how you do the math, approximately 87% of the incarnation was so nondescript it's not even worth documenting. Now, if God's going to put skin on once in history, for 30-something years, for all of humanity to observe, would you spend 87% of it, pumping gas at a Shell station in Lodi? Which is essentially what Jesus was doing, as far as we can tell. He's 30 years old when he finally gets out of the house. Talk about delayed adolescence. What is up with that? How long does it take to bake a Messiah anyway? What if what's going on, literally in the just-in-time revelation system that God sometimes, not always, uses, and you get to the baptism at the river. Remember the baptism at the river? Behold, my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, he says. At which point, what has Jesus done? Nothing. Would you start with, behold my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased? No, I would rewrite the script like, hey, everybody sit down and listen. Here comes Jesus. It's going to be really cool. Take notes. That's probably the way I'd start the voice from heaven. It's increasingly clear why I was not hired. But God's plan for us to be encouraged by the life of God before us is, it may take even 30 years to grow Jesus to the place where, 31 years, 215 days, and 15 hours and 6 minutes right between the moment when not today and, oh, do what he says. I mean, right there's an insight. What if every single moment of Jesus' life right up to then was absolutely necessary for him to be able to borrow from the wisdom of his very mature spiritual mother? We can't, not even Jesus can do this alone. We so need each other. What if it took all that time and all that living to become the Jesus that God was growing to know his own moment, which happened again and again and again? You want your call by 22. Jesus wasn't even sure how to get started until 30, 31, 33, depending who you ask. It's kind of hard, and it never ends. So I think what we might want to suggest while you're here at Westmont, which is a fabulous place to go, do you want to get your call, or do you want to become a person who understands calling? Do you want to be a person with a better clicker, you know? Come on, give me one. There we go. And some of you are kind of going, hey, wait a minute. You are the Design Your Life guy. Click me. Just do you, yeah. This whole follow, wait, listen thing you're about to sell us on. You teach designing your life. You talk about like coming up with a whole bunch of ideas and making it up yourself. Like, this is totally hypocritical. Good question. Really good question. What we mean by designing your life, briefly, is to, like Jesus, go out there and live, but live attentively and want. You have to act. He got up, he got dressed, he went to the wedding. He's paying attention. He's listening to his mother. He's leaning in. Learning how to do that really well. That's all I'm trying to teach people how to do. I'm just using design language to get away with it in the secular culture. Shh, don't tell them. It's just the Christian doctrine of vocational discernment with design language. It's a secret. Okay. Which means watch and listen and act like Jesus did. Spend your time here doing that. In fact, spend your time here learning how to do that. If you could graduate having learned how to really watch and really listen and then act into what you have seen and heard, you may or may not have your call, but you might be one of those people who is growing toward the blossom that God has in mind, and you can keep becoming into the ongoing perfection of the little chunk of the incarnation that you are. For we are the body of Christ. Is Christ still embodied on earth? Yes. Look left and right. You got a piece of that action. Your job is to show up for it. So, like Jesus, be ready, and you might even be surprised. The Lord be with you. So, Joel, I get to pray for these guys, right? Am I praying? Yeah. Okay. Don't go. You're going to go unprayed. Pray with me. Lord Jesus, who is among us and in us and around us in ways we absolutely don't understand, awaken in us that which you would have us long for. Awaken in us the desire to be hearers more than even to have heard. Awaken in us an urgency to see even more than the wish to have seen. Awaken in us the faith to act when what we wish for is the knowledge that we are right. Move us toward you. Let us revel in this special time of years at Westmont and with one another and share together in the task. Can we be Marys to one another and point out not necessarily what we know, but what we sense as a gift to one another, gently but encouragingly and powerfully? Lord, perfect us, and may we blossom and glorify you. And all God's people agreed and said together, amen. Have a good day.